Good morning, friends. Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I'm actually about to head into the garden and unfortunately start ripping out plants. Squash bugs have completely overtaken my garden. Now this happens every year. Usually I'm prepared for it. Usually I sow things in successions. However, I've planted squash and zucchini twice now. Before I've even really gotten a large harvest, they've just been completely demolished. My tromboncino squash, you guys, my tromboncino squash. I had one that was like getting so long. I mean, the video I just shot on Friday, you guys could see how beautiful this thing was. Well, I go out there the other day and I mean, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of squash bugs on there and eggs on there, and it's completely dead. I have to completely rip it out. And so today, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna start ripping out dead plants in the garden. I obviously don't want those squash bugs to go find other things. I've got some tomato plants that have blight. I have my fava beans that have completely died. So I'm gonna rip up a whole bunch of stuff and I'm actually gonna re-sow it. And I know that might be silly. Some of you guys may be asking why would I re-sow it if I'm definitely not gonna see the, the fruit of that harvest, and honestly, the short answer is I just feel called to do it. I know that in this season of transition, I really appreciate knowing that I'm going to go into Jessica's and I'm going to have food growing and I'm going to have a beautiful space where I can go find peace and just feel calm and kind of a hectic transition. And so I really want the new owners of our house to feel that. I want them to come here and know that I put a lot of love and attention into the garden, and I hope that it makes the transition easier for them. So while I may not see the bounty of that, I'm hoping that it brings joy to them. So I'm gonna rip it up and plant some more beans. I think I'm gonna try to re-sow some squash, maybe on that trellis, because I think that would be really cool. And I don't know, there's some things I'm gonna do. I don't really know yet. Right now I know I'm just gonna go and get everything cleaned off the trellises to get all the diseased plants out of the garden. It's pretty early here, but the sun's out and shining, but I'm gonna try to get it done before it gets too hot. Also on the front end of this video, wanted to let you guys know, you're only going to see 3 videos this week from me, my sweet little Abby June. I was working the other day on the back porch and I had my smoothie beside me and the girl just walks by and accidentally knocks her smoothie all over my laptop. It was literally like within seconds, it completely shuts off and no longer works. So we had to take it to the Apple store. It is now being sent off to repair. So I'm working on Nathan's computer on a different editing software that I've not used in a really long time. And honestly, it's just, I'm having a hard time. And so I'm only gonna be doing 3 videos this week. Hopefully my laptop will be back on Friday and completely fixed. If you guys would just kind of stand in agreement with me on that, that would be great. But that is why you're only gonna be seeing 3 videos this week, because well, I'm really not that good at editing, and trying to figure out a different editing software is just, it's too much. I just don't know how to do it, and so I'm taking this as a sign to kind of take a break this week. And so, however that may look, it may look like my laptop getting ruined. That's okay. I'm just gonna roll with it. And I'm just gonna, count the days off as a blessing. But let's head out to the garden and we'll get started. I left my pruners in the car when we went to Jessica's the other day, so I'm definitely going to need those. The flowers still look really pretty despite all the other things dying in the garden. These are lush. Also, check out my Chinese noodle beans. There's been bees all in here. Look at these really pretty blooms that they put off. These purple blooms. So that's exciting. This trellis is actually doing really well. And here is my super sad tromboncino. Literally everywhere I looked, I just killed like 10 squash bugs mating. That is seriously so disheartening. It truly is, because tromboncino is one of my favorite things to grow, and so knowing that at least probably while I'm at this house, I'm not going to be getting any Tromboncino squash. Makes me sad. However, it has been a really difficult year for pests. It's been a really difficult year as far as just me having to be hands off in the garden. And so, unfortunately, that is just part of it. That's just what happens. So I'm trying to not get too discouraged. Usually what we do is we take a torch and we actually burn all of the plants. But I don't want to do that. And we just kind of, you know, torch all the bugs. But I don't want to do that because I do have all these tomato plants behind here that are actually like doing really well, and so I don't want to burn the plant where it is. So what I'm probably gonna do is put on gloves, remove it. We actually have a burn pile where we put diseased plants, and then when Nathan gets home from work today, I'll just have him burn them all. And so that's usually what I do. Like I've mentioned probably several times on previous videos, is you do not want to put these in, if there's any sort of diseased plants, you don't want to put that in your compost bin, especially like some of the tomatoes I'm ripping out has blight on them. I don't want that leaching into the soil that I'm like amending my beds with, and so that is just something to be mindful of. It's a little baby squash bug on there. So this was my only Tromboncino. I don't know that it is salvageable. I could potentially cut probably the top half off and use it, but I doubt it. I feel like I literally have like the heebie-jeebies. Like there is like little baby squash bugs just like crawling all over me. It's so funny, like the things too. Like I'm looking right now. I was gonna wait for Nathan, but there are so many squash bugs. I just see like, I mean, I've killed probably 30 just since ripping the plant off, but there are so many babies, and obviously I don't want them to like gravitate back. So I am gonna put on some gloves, take them over there, and just go ahead and burn them now, because they will find their way back into the garden, which is really unfortunate. And a lot of people ask me, what do you do for squash bugs? How do you deal with that? I succession sow. I just know that it's something that's gonna happen every single year. But some things that you can do, you can simply remove the eggs when you see them. They're like these tiny little copper eggs. A lot of times you'll see them like on the underside, the bottom side of the leaf. However, I've seen these when, you know, once they've taken over, you'll see them everywhere. You can, you know, spend a lot of time looking over your plant, removing them when you see them. You can also use soapy water. So literally you're just mixing soap and water and spraying over. I've been doing a lot of research on this because we eat a lot of squash and zucchini. And so for me, it's kind of disheartening, you know, having to still buy something when I am capable of growing it, but I'm just dealing with the pests so bad. And so I'm like, there has to be a way to grow squash and zucchini and just not deal with the mess of the stinking squash bug, you know? And so what I have been researching and what I have found is that you can put like row cover on top of it, and that would help. Obviously that wouldn't work if you're, you know, buying or growing some sort of trellising squash. So the Tromboncino, for instance, the center cut squash, and that wouldn't work. But if I was just doing an entire bed of, you know, just your typical squash and zucchini, straight neck, crook neck, you know, black beauty zucchini, I don't see why I couldn't add some sort of, you know, PVC or some, you know, that wire netting that I used back in the winter and put on some sort of row cover. So I think that that's actually the method that I'm gonna try and do. The only downfall of that, and what I found that I had issues with last year when I used the row cover on my brassicas, was that we didn't have a good system for lifting up the netting to be able to water. And it also makes me a little bit nervous to do that. Although it is a thin fabric, you are still, it's like a heat box, you know, and so that makes me nervous trying to do that in the summertime. Maybe if I was trying to do an early spring harvest, you know, I could do that. I'm not really sure. So I am gonna just play around with that and just see, because I am always looking for better methods. There's a squash bug coming at me right now. I am always looking for better methods because it's something that we buy a lot. And so for me, I hate buying it when I have the ability to grow it. But honestly, as bad as they've been this year, it makes me think, is it even worth messing with? Like, do I even grow it, or do I just, you know, this is the thing too, like, I can go buy organic squash and zucchini at Whole Foods or the farmer's market, and for me, it's less headache than dealing what I'm dealing with now and inviting all of these pests and these nuisance into my garden. And so that is something to think about too. Like, tomatoes typically are pretty easy for me to grow. Like, there's a lot of things in my garden that are easy for me to grow and that I can maintain, you know, the pests on them pretty easily. If you are dealing with a crop that you are just like having a hard time, and then it's inviting that pest to just kind of overrule your entire garden, I would urge you to ask yourself, can I buy this from another farmer and just not have to deal with the headache and then all the repercussions that come from that? Like right now, I've got my tomato plants over here by my tromboncino. I guarantee you I didn't kill all those squash bugs, right? So they're going, just gravitating straight to that tomato plant, which is going to cause, you know, issues as well. Or obviously the tromboncino, like, you're not seeing anyone around here, you know, growing that. So that's one of those that I want to try to figure out. But just for your normal squash and zucchini, those are things that I'm trying to ask myself, could I support another farmer, you know, and just buy it from them and not have to deal with all the things and all the pests that it's bringing into my garden? So I've actually already ripped out all of my other squash and zucchini that was in the bed with the sunflowers, and that's something that I replanted, but I ripped that out again. So as of right now, I have 0 squash and zucchini in my garden. And honestly, like, I'm just okay with that. I am just in a season, you guys know I've talked about this a lot here recently. I'm just in a season where I'm being okay with all the imperfections and all the quote-unquote failures in the garden, and I'm just giving myself grace. So typically this is something that would probably really, like, just get me down in my spirits. And as you guys can see, I'm smiling because I'm just like, well, what do you do? The pest got it, and so be it. But I wanted to show you guys something really cool, because this is why I can come out to the garden and still find joy and still smile, because I don't really linger in the failures because they're inevitable. They're going to happen. But I really celebrate the victories, because those are the things that kind of give me that boost and that motivation too, to just keep going and celebrate the wins. And so you guys know Nathan planted all those sunflowers for me. They're starting to bloom. They're so beautiful. I cannot wait to show you guys. Here's a little side note. This pretty little dahlia. Look at all these. This one's really pretty. Look how big that one's gotten. That's crazy. These are all starting to come up. Oh, you little Japanese beetle, you. You got to go. Ah. Check that out. I love this part right here. It's when you you come out here, you see it starting to open. It's literally like the promise of what's to come. I think it's so incredibly beautiful. So proud of Nathan. There's a lot of these about to open up. Look at that. But there is one right over here. Oh, and check out all my cucamelons, guys. These are all just going crazy, so that's really exciting. I've got some zinnias thrown in here. Alright, here's the real winner. Check that out. Is that not the most beautiful picture you have ever seen? Oh, so pretty. So that wasn't nearly that open yesterday when I came out here. I mean, it was kind of starting, but not really. So that's really encouraging. Those are the things that I celebrate those, because that makes me happy, and that's awesome. Man, you guys, it is a toasty one today. I had, hey Lily, I had all in, would you go? Excuse you, go. I had all intentions of getting out here early and getting some of that done before it got super hot, but that just didn't happen, and that's okay. So I'm going to be coming out here probably later this afternoon after the sun goes down, doing a lot of the other maintenance. I try not to do a ton of things during the peak of the day, because one, it's just super hot, and sometimes that can stress your plants out. The ones I was obviously just ripping up, I went ahead and completely ripped those up. But I do want to encourage you guys, because I know so many people are dealing with so many just pests and just hardships in the garden, I guess, if you will, because I get so many messages on Instagram. I've read so many comments from you guys, and honestly, there's just not a whole lot we can do about it. You know, when you're dealing with nature, we're kind of at the mercy of nature, right? Like these pests, they just come out when you plant these things. It's just kind of how it works. So obviously, treat and do what you can, but also don't get discouraged if you end up having to rip up squash plants, or your tomatoes get taken out by blight. Like sometimes that is just what happens, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And so find those things in your garden that you can celebrate. For me, it's the zinnias, the dahlias, and the sunflowers. Those are just doing so well. They've been so resilient. They just are the gift that keeps on giving. Maybe for you that is your squash and zucchini, or maybe that is your tomato, and whatever that is, just celebrate those victories and know that there's always the next season. I try not to get too hard on myself on things that I literally have no control over. Like, yeah, I can go out there every single day and pick off the eggs, but at some point the squash bugs are going to overtake me. There's going to be way more of them than there is my two little hands, and sometimes I just soak it up and I'm like, well, oh well, what do you do? I'm sure there are better options, but in this season of my life, that's just kind of what I'm going with, and I'm just not getting discouraged by what I can't do in the garden. And maybe you just need to be in that same place where you go to the farmer's market and you buy from a farmer who is, cranking out squash and zucchini, or who is cranking out tomatoes, or whatever it is that you're having a hard time with. There are other options, and you can still source out locally, support your other local farmers. And so that's kind of where I am right now. That's kind of something I tell myself too, as well. If I can't grow it in my garden, I'm sure there's someone who is growing it and doing it really well. I'll just go and support them. Now, before I end this video, I really want to talk to you guys about something, and honestly just ask you all to be praying and standing in agreement with us on something. We have, goodness, I'm going to try to get through this without crying. This has been a very emotional few days. We go to church with a couple. It is actually the worship leader in our church. And if I'm being completely honest, I do not know them that well. We're not BFFs or anything like that. But one of the lovely things about community and as believers is when we see a need, it doesn't matter if they're my best friends, it doesn't matter if I know their whole life story or not. I believe in the same Jesus that they believe in, and I believe in the same healing power that they believe in. And I don't have to be in close relationship with them to be able to link arms with them and stand in agreement with them. And so this couple in our church have a beautiful daughter named Callie, who is almost 2 years old, and Callie was born with spina bifida, and she has overcome a lot in her short time on earth. And unfortunately right now she has come down with RSV, and she is in Arkansas Children's Hospital. She's on a vent. She is not making a whole lot of progression. Now, I feel like any parent watching this, immediately you put yourself in that situation, right? Like, I know that I put myself in that situation of what if that was June? What if that was Charlie? Like, it just hits home. It hits home. And seeing this sweet little picture of this girl just laying in a hospital bed, man, I mean, Nathan and I were just a basket case yesterday at church. And her father, who leads worship, we were not expecting him to be there, and he showed up and he sang and he worshiped and he praised the Lord, even though he was walking through something very, very challenging. And I had so much respect for him, because it's so easy for me to sit here and encourage you guys and tell you guys how good God is, and I believe he is good, but I'm not walking through really any huge obstacles that are like life or death situations. And I always would like to believe that if I was walking through that, I would still praise him and worship him as fearlessly as I do now. But thankfully, I've never had to walk through that. And I pray, Lord willing, like we won't have to walk through that. But seeing someone else walk out their faith so well is so encouraging. And I'm going to ask you guys, this week we are just going to do a lot of praying and fasting as a church, and Nathan and I as a family, just believing that God's will would take place over Callie's life. And we're just going to pray that peace would flood Jennifer and Daniel, Callie's parents, and ultimately that God would work miraculously in that little girl's life. And I'm going to ask you guys, I know you don't know this couple personally, but I believe that there is power in numbers and that there is power in prayers. And at the end of the day, we're all family. You don't have to personally know me. I don't have to personally know you. You know, guys don't even have to personally know Callie. But if you believe that Jesus is the ultimate healer, I'm going to ask you to take a minute this week as you are just drinking your cup of coffee, maybe while you're at work, or maybe while you're playing with your kids, that you would just stop and you would ask that God's healing would be upon her, that peace would just flood her family, and that there would be restoration, there would be healing. And I'm just going to pray in agreement and believe in that as well, because I do know that regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the outcome even, we serve a good God. And it's easy to say that when things are going well. But I'm going to believe that that is going to be the outcome, and that we're going to praise him and we're going to serve him regardless. So if you guys would just believe with me, be in prayer with us and our whole church family as we are praying for sweet little Callie, I would really appreciate that. I love that I have a space where I get to come on here and ask you guys this, because I don't take for granted that not everyone has these freedoms, right? Not everyone gets to just hop on the internet and be like, hey, I need support, I need prayer. Not everyone has those freedoms, and so I also don't take that for granted. But thank you guys so much for being a place where we can come to and we can ask for prayer, we can ask for healing, we can ask for you guys to stand in agreement with us for someone in our church family. That really does mean a whole lot to me and Nathan. So thank you guys so much for that. Thanks for hanging out with me in the garden. Thanks for praying for sweet little Callie. And I'll talk to you guys soon.